Joining me now is the Daily Caller's immigration reporter, Jenny Taylor. Jenny, massive moves in Congress this week and in the Senate, with the Senate border bill falling apart, being rejected. Talk us through this a little bit and why exactly Republicans were so keen to say no.
Right, exactly. So you had a bipartisan group in the Senate that negotiated this deal actually with the help of Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, who the House tried to impeach, of course, this week. So an interesting group of negotiators that crafted this bill that they said kind of met enough of the needs of each party, each side, to be able to come to the table that they thought could pass the Senate and possibly the House. Well, that bill came out and we found out that the promises, some of the biggest promises, such as ending catch and release, really weren't true. So releasing illegal aliens is still happening under this bill. That was like a big issue for the Republican Party and, of course, the House. So you have House Speaker Mike Johnson saying, absolutely, this is dead on arrival, and a number of others in leadership in the Republican conference in the House.
And Jenny, explain something to me here which I had trouble understanding as I was reading the bill in its various draft iterations. They kept saying, oh, well, you can shut down the border after a certain number of migrants cross. But the question I think a lot of Americans and people watching from outside of America is if you have the power to shut the border at that point, why not just simply shut the border full stop and put an end to this border crisis?
Right. It definitely puts this limit, and I think that the issue is that there are a lot of loopholes to that. So when I talked to Border Patrol agents about this deal, they saw that exactly for what it was. If someone comes across and they say they have a credible fear of returning to their country and they're a single adult, they could still be released. If they come as a family unit, they will be released. So those are big issues, and people will adapt to those things. Let's say if they're not a family unit, maybe they'll claim to be a fake family unit.
Yeah.
Or maybe you have people that come across and largely a lot of times people who say they have asylum claims or credible fears, it ends up getting adjudicated, and actually most of the time it gets rejected by an immigration judge. But of course, again, the process right now is so overstretched and overwhelmed that it's going to be hard to be able to make that happen quickly under such a deal in the chaos at the border.
And Jenny, I want to talk to you about this particular issue in particular, because I think it's really clear to people, we need to make clear to people that, it's not just necessarily all people who have good intentions and want to make a better life for themselves, which of course everybody in an immigrant nation understands. But this week, you revealed exclusively on the Daily Caller that Border Patrol agents released more than 30,000 migrants who crossed the southern border who were deemed as potential national security risks over the past 15 months. That's a shocking number. Tell us a bit more about this. How did you find this out? What sort of people are we talking about?
Right. So this is something called the Special Interest Alien List. It encompasses a number of nationalities that they could consider migrants from those countries to be of national security concern, whether it's due to terror ties or travel patterns in areas that are tied to terrorism. Things like that. It often goes back to terrorism and other national security risks. And so these people are flagged by the system, but it appears that catch and release also happens for these folks. The largest nationality under this list that was encountered is Turkish migrants. And I recently actually found myself in a number of Telegram channels where Turkish smugglers were recruiting migrants from across the globe to come across the southern border and had a very lucrative enterprise of charging people $10,000 a pop, arranging their travel almost like a travel agency and getting them across the southern border and showing it on TikTok to prospective customers to continue this pipeline. So this is not just one or two people coming across. It's creating entire enterprises for criminal and smuggling organizations.
And of course, people who come in who are on this sort of list and are, wanted by authorities for other things, and they're not deported, and then the news gets back, that's only going to encourage more such people, then this sounds like there will never be any way to really realistically deport people, even if they have been on terror watch lists. Is America now stuck with potentially, well, I don't want to be alarmist, but even, potential sleeper cells and things like that within its own borders?
I don't think it's alarmist at this point, because we recently reported on an al-Shabaab terrorist that crossed the southern border in March, was apprehended by Border Patrol, and was deemed a mismatch on the terror watch list, which actually ended up not being true. He was actually a member of al-Shabaab. They didn't find that out until after they released him almost a year later in January. Just last month, ICE nabbed him in Minnesota. He was actually not only a member of the terrorist organization, but he was involved in weapons and firearms and explosive manufacturing and movement. And so what was someone like that doing in the country for almost a year? And that's something that I don't think is just a one-off case.